And things were going great for me. I was, just, crushing it. I was, top of my game pretty much. Any scoreboard that I could be on top of, I was around the top, because it mattered very much to me. Again, that competitive nature, of, winning and being at the leaderboard. Scoreboards have just always been something I care deeply about. So anyway, things are going great. And wouldn't you know it, J&J decides to buy this dealership, and go direct. They didn't want to have any sort of distributorships anymore. Their model changed. And I was offered a position, but it was all the way out in like Suffolk County.
Welcome to the Founder's Journey podcast, where we unravel the life stories of unique and successful entrepreneurs. We will take a deep dive into their highs and lows and over-the-top accomplishments. So get ready for the Founder's Journey podcast with your host, Jimmy Dulambakis. All right, we have Ralph Marucci here. Thanks for being on the Founder's Journey podcast, Ralph. How you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me, Jim. Appreciate it.
All right. We're super excited to go through your story, learn about you, who you are, and you started Hydrate, company that you founded how long ago?
It is now 9 years.
9
years completed.
Not a short period of time.
Starting year 10, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. So let's start from the beginning. Where did you grow up? Where were you raised?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, oldest of three. I have two younger sisters, and you know what that means. I was the child the parents experimented on, so to speak. So the oldest, you kind of go through it a little bit. My dad was a cop. My mom stayed at home, which was the hardest job in the world. And so we didn't grow up, with very much, I want to say. And, my father worked very hard. And as a police officer in the 90s in New York, it was tough. It was tough work, especially under Mayor Dinkins. I think life was really difficult for him. And he used to bring his work home with him a little bit. So that meant I was a subordinate a lot of times, get in line, that kind of thing. But the strict upbringing was definitely part of what made me who I am today, So I guess part of it I don't regret.
You think they created like a structure for not structure, but like kind of like some order?
Definitely structure, definitely order, right? I had no choice. Dad was, if we, I don't know if we want to get into all the way back, but the context is always helpful with these things, I think. My grandfather immigrated here when he was just a child, one of nine. Seven of them made it. Two of them died from either disease or hunger. She came during the Great Depression. So,
They
coming
died
from,
here, or you're Italian, right?
yeah, I'm Italian. My grandfather on my dad's side, I'm talking about, he was one of nine. My mom's side, my grandmother was one of 12. So, obviously big families on both sides. I don't know how these people did it. They had no money, they had nothing. They had, literally just each other. My grandfather grew up in a room, smaller than the one I'm in now with nine of them. And like I said, two of them didn't survive during the Great Depression. My grandfather couldn't go to school. He had to go get firewood and keep the family warm and work for a nickel or a dime, whatever he can make. But then eventually, as he got older, they sent him off to the military, and he fought in World War II. My grandfather fought in the Battle of the Bulge, actually, as a tank sergeant, and brought back a lot of skills with him. He brought back, the ability to fix these types of machinery, and therefore he became a mechanic. And that really gave him a stable income, whereas he came from a world we don't know from stable incomes. Eventually became the superintendent of a building. And here's a quick little ancient wisdom for you. The building landlord said to him, "Hey, you can live here rent free, just take care of the building." And him coming from poverty was like, "No, I'll pay rent, you pay me a wage. This way, in case you fire me, I don't go homeless." Very interesting,
Oh,
approach there from my grandfather, I thought. So he was right for that, because, he wanted to keep a roof over his head. My father then, of course, was able to go to school and do various things that he couldn't do. Got great grades. My father could have probably been a lot of things, but became a cop because, again, survivalistic mentality was like, do something where they're not going to just fire you over the color of your tie. Being a blue collar or cop, that's going to keep
Yeah.
you employed. You know what I'm saying? So, well, for the most part, anyway. And so he kind of, I don't want to say settled, but he did something safer, right? And so growing up, now back to my growing up, he finally was able to have a house and a car. And now, as a result of my grandfather and my father's hard work, I was able to go to a Catholic high school. I went to Xavier in Manhattan, which was obviously and still is a very, very good Jesuit school, where, learning and discipline are certainly at the center. And, I was afforded that ability to go to, have a better opportunity because of the hard work that they, both, endured during their time. And a lot of just practical wisdom all the way through, things like it'll take you 5 seconds or 5 minutes to get into trouble, but 5 years or 50 years to get out of trouble.
Right.
Making sure to stay on that straight and narrow. I always have these voices in my head from my grandfather and my dad, who's thankfully still with us, because and with that I'm able to kind of navigate my life, I feel. So I owe a lot to both of them, I think, for their dedication, their hard work, even as tough as they were, and they were both tough sons of guns. It was, in hindsight, it was for the best. So
Also, I feel like around that time you're growing up in the 90s, you're a teenager in the 90s into the 2000s, you probably could get
2000, yeah,
yeah,
2000, I was 15. So
you can get in trouble, and there's a lot worse things that were happening around that time. I'm not saying bad things don't happen now, but it
oh,
was
they
a
do.
it was a little bit more dangerous. So let me ask you this. So your grandfather comes here, becomes a superintendent,
Yeah.
works his way up. Your dad becomes a cop. Your mom's a stay-home mom.
Mm.
Did you enjoy having your mom at home? Like, did you feel like did that
Oh,
bring
yeah.
comfort? Like, what was the experience having a mom that was home with you and taking care of you and such?
Yeah, no, I mean, I wouldn't trade that for anything. I mean, you know, uh, as an adult, we look at income, we look at things, experiences we can give our kids. Now, as a father myself, but when you're a kid, you don't have any idea how much money your parents make, right? And this is something I've learned to be so important, is that what you remember is the time spent, and the things you got to do together. And so having my mother around all the time, and she literally, obviously I don't have to tell you, took care of the entire house. Everything is spotless, just cooked, cleaned, you name it. My life was made very easy in that respect, having such a loving mother. But my mom and I felt like she was a friend, and she kind of balanced my dad because he was pretty strict and tough, and like I said, the cop mentality and everything else. She balanced him out with a softness, a touch that was, certainly gentle. And I think as I said it before, I owe a lot to my dad, and my grandfather, but I owe so much to my mom too for balancing me and making me, empathetic and caring to individuals, less fortunate, etc. And so I think it's made me a well-rounded person to have them both, in their roles that they played in my life and still do. But mom was the type, who can laugh with you, cry with you, and she would threaten you, but not personally. She'd threaten you with your father's coming home soon, so don't
Yeah.
make me tell him, right? So even there, she kept us a little straight and narrow too. But yeah, no, definitely super valuable to have mom around, and that's certainly not an experience I think a lot of kids get to have today.
Mhm.
Not to say that there aren't mothers that work out, inside the home only. But having two incomes these days seems to be much more sought out and even required, to maintain. So, unfortunately, I don't think as many kids get to grow up having, a parent or a mother, especially so close all the time like we got to.
Yeah. Yeah. So the reason I asked that is because like my wife was working, and we it was tough because we fell into like the New York City rat race of like work, work, work,
Yeah.
hire a nanny to watch your kid, put them in daycare and stuff like that. And I think when you pick up the hood and you look at the cost, right? And what you're making and stuff, sometimes like and there's a value of, like you mentioned, that love, that empathy, that care that your mom gave you, that's kind of priceless. So
Yeah.
even if you're looking at dollar for dollar, yeah, it makes sense to work and to earn more income so you live a more better life. But what about
Mm.
that experience that the child has with the mom or the dad? It doesn't matter
Yeah.
who's staying home as long as, if it's one person taking care of them. And listen, I had nanny. She was fantastic. I'm sure there's tons of nannies out there that are just wonderful people. It's just kind of
Oh, yeah.
like, I think as a country, we're kind of coming back to this culture of like, how do you raise your kids?
Yeah.
Right or wrong. So
Yeah,
you're
that's
in
good.
Brooklyn, growing up. What kind of neighborhood was it? Did you have friends? Did you go, was it like riding around bikes? Like, what was your neighborhood like?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because I grew up, I think, in a kind of unique part of Brooklyn. I grew up in Midwood, and in Midwood, near Brooklyn College, where I know you from. That neighborhood is mostly Orthodox Jewish. Um, but we had family in the neighborhood, which is what brought us there. My mother, after they grew up down Third Avenue in like Sixth Street, like on Carroll Gardens. But then my grandmother moved to Avenue L and 35th Street, and we bought a house on Avenue J and East 28th Street to be near to her. And my great grandmother actually lived next door, which was pretty crazy. My great aunt also lived a couple houses down. So we did have family in the neighborhood, but predominantly the block in the area was Orthodox Jewish. And back then, obviously the 90s, I don't think it mattered where you grew up. The 90s was just a place where you played outside all the time. It didn't matter who you were, what, or what ethnicity or background. Everybody was just, all the kids were just playing outside. So, I was playing roller hockey and football in the street and baseball in the schoolyard down the block. And my dad, was very good about organizing a lot of the games that we would play. All the Jewish kids would flock to him because their fathers weren't as involved from what I recall. So right on my street, and I did have a dear friend down the block, who I grew up with, very close with. But a lot of the times when I grew up a little bit more, about 12 or 13, I would make my father drive me over down 20th Avenue, to 76th Street in Bensonhurst, where a lot of my friends that I grew up playing hockey with would play roller hockey in the schoolyard. And I mean from the dawn till dusk. We were there at PS 186 schoolyard on a Saturday. You could find me and about 30 other kids, couple of goalies, couple nets, playing roller hockey from, like I said, from the time we could open our eyes till it was too dark to see the puck. And I would even skate home from there down Avenue N. So, sports was a huge part of my upbringing. The neighborhood I grew up in wasn't really big into sports, so I went where there was. And even Marine Park, which another place I spent a lot of time, a lot of friends there, plenty of sports to be had: baseball, football, hockey, you name it, basketball. Just a huge part of my upbringing, and still to this day, sports keeps me young, keeps me feeling young, and just competition at my core is like kind of a driving force, in all things that I do, including business, of course. So I would say that that part of my upbringing has a lot to do with who I became.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's funny because where I grew up in like Diker Borough Park,
Mhm.
there
Yeah.
was there was no basketball courts around. There was one, no one played in it.
Uh,
And,
uh,
so I would go about a mile to a park nearby where there was a pretty decent games, and I would dribble the ball all the way there and all the way back,
yeah.
practicing left hand, right hand, through the
Yeah.
legs. So when I got there, I was pretty warmed up, and
Yeah.
I would eat breakfast at 9, get there, and I would stay, like you said, till dusk. I would have $5. That's just enough for a hot dog or 2 and a
Yeah.
Gatorade from the
Right.
vendor on the corner, and that was it. I would
Well,
just stay
that
there
was
all
all you
day.
needed. Wait,
That's
you
it.
didn't play in Diker Park? They had plenty of sports there, I feel like.
That was too far for me because I was like
Oh,
that was probably a mile and a half for me, like,
okay.
8th and stuff, those parks were pretty far.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
tell me, so during school, like, because 'cause you're the oldest kid, right, in your family, how were you in school? Were you, like, a good student? Could you
Yeah.
focus? Like, did you get good grades?
Yeah, from kindergarten, they tested me to be in it was like a new program at the time called CIG, Center for Intellectually Gifted. Um, I think I made that on personality, so more than highly intelligence per se, although my mother and father might disagree with me, from what I can recall anyway. I remember being tested and them being like, "Wow, this kid's got a lot of spunk," and anyway, they put me into this program when I was in kindergarten. It was only one class of us, and we stayed together right through 8th grade. Even though we left elementary school, we all went from PS 193 to IS 240, which is known as Huddy. And we were in this gifted program right through that time, and it was much more challenging, I want to say, than probably mainstream, I guess. Yet I was able to maintain a pretty good average, but again, you didn't really keep track of average until you got to junior high, which I was around a 90 or so. My father really wouldn't have it any other way. It was kind of like studies and academics came before absolutely anything. It was really critical that we get good grades, me and my sisters, but he definitely took it way easier, especially on my youngest sibling, who came much later. I'm about 10 years older than her. So by then he was like probably a little bit softened. um,
He's probably tired. He's
yeah, he's
exhausted.
tired from beating the hell out of me, I mean, making sure that I was doing my stuff, probably took a lot out of him. But he wouldn't just say, "Go do your homework and goodbye and good luck." He would sit over my shoulder and sit with me and do the math. And I remember even reading books that were, I can't believe that we were reading books that were in Old English, like, Heidi and The Secret Garden and some of these books that were written, and just it was just hard to read these. I mean, for any kid, I would think it would be hard, but in 3rd grade. And so he would read a page and I would read a page and we would kind of go back and forth. So it wasn't like he was just like, go study, go figure it out. He cared very much. I remember having a tutor a time or two that they paid for, which I'm sure wasn't cheap or easy for them at the time. So, he prioritized it, and, I did my best. I always felt like if I did my homework, I showed up to school, I participated, that's like kind of the minimum that you got to do in order to maintain at least, I want to say, like a B. You
Yeah.
obviously want to do well in the test to get you over the hump of being an A student. Um, and I was able to achieve that. I was able to maintain, like I said, around a 90 or so, and in these higher, more accelerated programs. So, thankfully, again, because of the sacrifices that were made from my grandfather, who couldn't even go to school, let alone get good grades, to my father, who then, had the opportunity to go, and he was also a very good student. I was also able to be that in a more accelerated program, and then in a great high school afterwards. Getting into Xavier certainly was a challenge for anybody, but yeah, I was able to do well there as well.
Okay. Um, what's your take on like sports and education, the balance between now you're a father of three?
Yeah,
There's there's a trend in America where, sports all year, travel teams, private coaches.
yeah.
Like, what's your take on that? Because it seemed like your dad was like education first, then if we have time, we'll play the sports.
Yeah, it was both. They were both super important. Studies came first, but then athletics were the thing you do right after. Or vice versa. Like the sun's still out in the winter. Coming home from school. All right, come on, let's go outside and throw the ball. But then when we come in, we got to get to homework and dinner, and then time for bed. Like so there was a routine, but student athlete is a phrase we all familiar with, and any kid that is an athlete is also asked to be a student. It's not like you could be exempt from that. I think we've learned a lot over the years. I think younger boys, in particularly, would do better if they were in a more creative, free for all kind of athletic type of environment. I think studies have shown that actually gives them a propensity for creativity and puts them in a better spot for learning. That being said, we still kind of subscribe to the same mentality of like, you got to do your homework, and then if you don't make your grades, you can't play. And that's what the schools enforce as well. My oldest son is a student athlete. He's in 7th grade. And he does a really great job of balancing it. He's super anal about getting his work done. And you know, I don't really actually have to prod him very much. So I'm blessed to have a kid that's like that. I don't think I was quite like that. I think I had to be prodded a little bit more when it came down to it. I wanted to be much more recreational. And that being said, he is recreational, just kind of secondary. But in general, as you kind of pointed out, the question about, you know, in America, you know, what's the deal with student athletes? I think it's so important to be both. And I think that athletics, as I said, have still served me to this day. At 40 years old, I still participate and I play ice hockey. I grew up playing ice hockey. I played roller hockey. No more baseball anymore, but softball. You know, and even football. I still play in a men's league right now, which I can't believe I'm doing. It's a flag football league, but again, keeps you young, keeps the competitive juices, and you know, with the stressors of the day too, being out there, especially when I'm skating, there's nothing else. You know, there's nothing else that exists practically in the world. And I think being able to clear your mind and be able to relieve stress in such ways really speaks to longevity. It really speaks to keeping you from being burnt out. You know, it can't be all work, 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 work. That is not healthy. And I think we have all come to learn that post COVID, especially. I think a lot of people have realized the importance for wellness, mental, physical wellness, spiritual wellness, which is also a component we haven't talked about, which is a huge, huge piece for me. And so, you know, it's about balance, work-life balance, being with my family and on all that to this day is still critically important, but sports has always played a central role.
Huh. So you're in Xavier, right? In high school.
Yep.
You're, you know, senior, you're gonna graduate. What's your plan? Like, what did you want to do and where did you want to go? Like, you wanted to go to college and then do what? Like, what was your plan?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'll take a little time with this because I think it segues nicely. So first of all, I was at Xavier. I was kind of middle of the pack in terms of grades and everything, and SAT scores, which were so important. I got around 1100, which is good, but not amazing. So, like, where are you gonna go? Hofstra, Fordham, Marist. These types of schools are schools that I got into, that I wanted to go to. My friends were going there. It was a way for me to go away to school, but not be like terribly far where I could pop, you know, possibly pop back home, what have you, have mom do laundry, that type of thing. You know, and this was kind of what I focused on doing as far as going to college is concerned. My dad, of course, still very much involved, kind of looked at things holistically, like you don't really know like what you want to be. You know, like you do know, like and what did I really know? I knew I wanted to make money in life like anybody else. I thought maybe I'd grow up and be a CPA because they make money. You know, I'm good at math, you know, things like that. My hopes and dreams of becoming a pro athlete, it was over at that point. But, you know, that was a dream for a long time. It was as much as I could hold on to it. But you know, college was kind of like a way, the way I saw it was just like the next school you go to where you're going to learn new things and you're going to figure out what you want to be. And, you know, hopefully it's at a fun school too, where you can get a good college experience. Dad was like, you know what? I'm not going to spend $40,000 a year while you figure it out. Why don't you go to a local school where we don't spend as much money? And then if you graduate from there and you want to go to graduate school and you know what you want to be, I'll pay for that, you know? And in hindsight, that was extremely reasonable, considering all the context of my situation. Um, but at the time, it was miserable. I was like, "What do you mean? Like, where am I going to go?" You know, and he's like, "Well, you know, you go to Brooklyn College, and that's like free, literally. Like, you basically were paying for books. Like, that's it. You know, I was local. I literally lived around the corner. Now,
Did
this
you get a
comes from a guy.
scholarship there?
Yeah, I had, well, also local, money, and then just from, you know, being a decent enough student, they gave me, I think it was like a quarter, you know, but again, it was so cheap. It was
Yeah.
like cheaper than high school where I went. I went to private high school, and mind you, it was way closer. So who goes closer to college than they do high school? This guy right here. I went on a bus and a train to go to high school, and I walked to college, which was insane. And the one thing my dad did for me at the time was he finished the basement and he's like, all right, you could live down there, it'd be like an apartment. So I used to joke with people on campus and be like, I'm the only one with a dorm around here, because no dorms at Brooklyn College. Now,
That's it.
listen,
Well, I wanted to say, 'cause that's
yeah,
where we met. We met at Brooklyn
that's where we
College,
met. Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
reason I went to Brooklyn College was I thought I just wanted to be a civil engineer.
Right.
So, I was like,
That's a
"Okay." I
good,
didn't
that's
even
a good idea.
Yeah, I was like, I like to build things, whatever, so I was like, "I just what I wanna do." But I didn't have the grades to get into, like, what is it, Polytechnic or whatever at the time, so I
Yeah.
was like, "I'm gonna go
Yeah.
to Brooklyn College for a year or 2, and then I'll transfer over," right?
Right.
And, my some of the older people in my community who were Greek went there, and they all graduated, and they got good jobs and whatever, so I was like, "Oh, it's a good school." My parents, when it was time I had a little bit different story, but we didn't have a conversation about who's gonna pay college. I guess they assumed I was paying for college, and I was assuming they were paying for college. So, before college started, they're like, "So what are you gonna do?" And I was like, I don't know. I think I'm just gonna go to Brooklyn College because my brother was at Baruch, and my brother's
Yeah.
like, "Hey, I'm paying for college. Like, I'm just letting you know you're gonna pay for college too, because our parents don't have the money." And I didn't have the grades for the scholarship, so I was
Hmm.
like, "All right, so let me go to economics school." So I went to Brooklyn College. Like you
Yep.
said, very affordable. It was a great education, and I took a business class there, and it just changed everything.
Yeah.
Once I took that class, it was like small business. And I was just so fascinated, it just put me on a new trajectory that I changed my whole life?
Yeah.
But anyway,
Surprised,
so
it's kind of funny how that could happen. And I think college is, in it's such a big decision in hindsight because had I gone anywhere else, Jimmy, I don't know where I would actually be right now in life. I mean, I'm sure, God sees everything. Like I think I would still be, very successful. I think life would be great. No question about it. I feel that way. But at the same time, and we can get into philosophy on this, but I won't. I went to Brooklyn College and I met my wife and my work wife there, right? So my business partner and my wife of 12 years, I both met at Brooklyn College. So, like, if I didn't go there, like, obviously, I would never have met these people, or maybe I would have in some other way, but I don't think that we would have the same connection that we have now. And
so
so my life would be completely different, really, when you think about it, my career, my family, and everything about it. So, what a decision that ended up being, and of course, I'm very grateful for everything in my life, and I love my wife and my partner who's my best friend, Eric. You know him too for a long time, and
Mhm.
we ended up pledging the fraternity there. That's how we met. Which I didn't think I would ever do, by the way, pledge a local fraternity. Like maybe if I went away to school, but not a local one. Like luckily I had friends from high school that were still around that I was still friends with. I was like, I don't need friends. But anyway, in hindsight, it was a great decision. The networking and the connections that I made there, and those guys are still friends of mine. Because the one good thing I'll say about going to a commuter school and joining a fraternity or having friends that you make there is that nobody really moves very far, especially when you live in
No.
New York. Like, where are you going? So people were buying houses, but where are they buying? In Brooklyn, Staten Island, like Jersey. They're close. Everybody's close. So we're still to this day getting together with them, their wives, and their now our children are friends, which is
When
crazy when you see it come full circle like that after all these years. So, just that whole question about college, like what a decision to go to Brooklyn College. Now my entire ecosystem is surrounding everything that's come from there.
that's
So I've actually gone back to campus a few times and try to like kind of give back a little bit and talk to some of the students and just share this kind of thing like my story, my journey, answer their questions. I've actually hired a few kids now from Brooklyn College
awesome.
that are two outstanding people that do a lot for my business already. So just Brooklyn College, yeah, I can't give them more sterling endorsement after not wanting to go there at all. So
It's interesting, like, the way the path works, and what's the other part is, like, if you go away, go, like, Ohio or something, a lot of the
yeah,
kids don't live there. They're not from that well, maybe there's a
right,
percentage that live in the state, but not in specifically that city. Uh,
Right.
and then when you graduate, everyone just kind of goes back to where they're from, right? Until they
Exactly.
figure it out or if they get a job opportunity and such. Okay. All right. So let me ask you this. So you're in college. What's your plan? Like, where are you going from there? Because you said you couldn't figure it out. Your dad's like, go there to figure it out.
Yeah.
You're in college, you meet your future wife, you meet your future work wife and everybody, right? And
Yeah.
all that. And where do you go from there? Like, what happens
So
at the tail end of college and then after college?
So it actually happened a little bit before. That's why I was alluding to the segue earlier because when I was about 16, and this all kind of leads up very nicely, is that I genuinely did not know what I wanted to be. And I thought by then I should know. Of course,
Ooh.
16 years old, you put the weight of the world on your shoulders. You think you're supposed to. And, there's my dad right there again saying to me, the classic line of do what you love to do, right? I think that's good advice. Most people should hear it if they don't already. It's cliche almost how much it's said. But he's like, but be brutally honest with what you love to do. And at that time, at 16 years old, what did I like love to do besides sports, which couldn't really be a path per se, although I considered being like a sports agent, things like that. But what did I really enjoy was actually partying with my friends. It was like, going out and having fun and meeting people and girls and everything else, right? He's like, well, that sucks. He's like, but how can you make money doing it? And that's actually what led me more to you than anything else, right? Because I logically came to the conclusion that being a club promoter would check that box, right? It was like, here I am being able to throw a party, have all my friends come, take care of them, whatever, meet people and have fun and make money doing it. What a great concept. And so as you know, because that's how, that's part of your background, that we, kind of started promoting for clubs in Brooklyn and Manhattan. And low level at 18 years old, you're barely able to get into places. There were 18 and over parties we used to throw. But the reason I bring that up and the reason why it's so interesting and such great advice that my dad really gave me, maybe without even realizing it, was that club promoting, what do you need to be really great at that? You need to know how to like reach people, so like marketing. You need to know how to like show value, so sales, right? And marketing, business marketing became my major in college. And I was just kind of seeking out different ways to like consider how to be a better promoter at the time, and do it from like a logical business perspective. And of course, I actually hadn't finished my 4-year degree, got about 100 credits deep, when I was offered a position really right going into my senior year. I looked at it as a summer job down on Wall Street. There was a venture capitalist that started a business amongst the 6 others that he had at the time, and the company was called Watermatic. And this is back in 2007, before anybody cared about necessarily their health, even water quality. Certainly, go green wasn't even a thing. So, like sustainability and wellness, which is so critical today, back then, like 20 years ago, wasn't really very top of mind. But he had this disruptive concept that had this technology that connected to the cold water source that eliminated the need for trucks and bottles and deliveries. And it tasted good, it looked good, it was very convenient. Like clearly, when you tried it, it made a lot of sense. So I was one of the first sales guys to start there, and
So
because of my background,
were you
sorry.
working in college when you were doing this?
This was Yeah, so work in college was the clubs on the weekends. I during the week I worked at Gargiulo's for a while. I think everybody, it's like a rite of passage.
Like a catering hall?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. I was working 10 a.m. to 2 a.m. Like felt like more like a slave ship than a caterer call. That was hard work. And then when I got sick of that, I was doing like loans. I was a junior loan officer, like cold calling people. So like, being interpersonal, being into like sales, promotion, marketing, that was always kind of my thing. I always knew that I had a personality, I had a heart for people, I wanted to help people. It was just kind of like circling the wagons on like how I was actually going to do it. So this job came along, and it looked like a summer job at the time, where I was going to be able to put on a suit every day, a tie back then, which was not even a question. Everybody wore a tie. Now nobody. I have a rack of tie that we never wear anymore, but the back then everybody did, and so I got on the train, crack of dawn, go to Wall Street, go in there, get leads handed to you for the day, and then we'd go out and they'd give you a Metro card and go on these appointments and go convince people to try this water purification system. I happen to be very good at it though. I sold a bunch of systems like in my first week. Then I recruited all my friends from Brooklyn College. I'm like, guys, you got to see this technology. It's really easy. It's cool. It's an opportunity to sell to any business in Manhattan. And believe it or not, a lot of them did follow me, including Eric and my wife Jess at the time. Well, which she wasn't at the time. She was barely my girlfriend, but a number of guys followed me along, and we all started selling for this guy, Sam Shannon. He was a venture capitalist down on Wall Street. And they had a really cool like setup because it was a big office with like a number of different businesses under one roof. So you see like all these professionals like dialing phones, and like it was just something very exciting about it.
Energy.
What's that?
The energy.
The energy, yeah, it was so like it was palpable, and everybody was making money, and it became kind of addictive almost to the sense where I was like, I think I want to take a semester off and continue here. I don't really foresee myself stopping this and just going back to school. I could always go back and get my degree. Lo and behold, and not to continue to segue too much or down my career path, but two of the guys I recruited had the money to break off of this guy and start our own, which at 22 years old, I wasn't really prepared. I felt like for my own business, I thought I had to do some more real world learning and have that experience before I could, branch off like that. But the opportunity presented itself. And these are guys that were some of my best friends at the time. And I knew I could sell it. So it was just like, just go and do it. And they got the money. So I didn't have to worry about really putting much up. And that's exactly what we did. We left the VC and started our own company called Skywater back in fall of 2007. So we were only with him for about 4 months before we left. And then I was kind of a frictiony time. I'm sure, as you can imagine, he wasn't too pleased with that. But we were able to get the business off the ground and get it started. So I could go down into that a little bit, but I
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
stop for a second
Well,
there. And
I wanted
wow,
to ask you something about
yeah.
like uh you're 20. So it's interesting culturally. You at 20, so your grandfather at 22, if they had the money or the opportunity, they would start a business, right? Because people are getting
Uh,
married at 21, they're trying to
that's
buy a
true.
house by 25.
That's
Now you
true.
fast forward and you're like 22 and you're like, "Whoa, hold on, I need." So in hindsight, did you really need more time? Or do you think it
Yeah.
was a good, like, were you really ready at 22? Like, going back thinking back now.
Well, I was, because effectively we did do it. We did,
That proves it.
you know what I'm saying? Like I did literally, like, it was me, Eric, two brothers, and we left and we audaciously started something from scratch. Now I wasn't really like mature enough to wrap my head around all of the components, the complexities of the business itself. I knew how to sell, which if you ask most entrepreneurs, sometimes that's all you really need, because if you get some people to start saying yes and you start, getting some clients, and you can refer to those clients and they build some credibility for you, you're getting the revenue to come in. Now you just got to make sure you're not overextending yourself where you're, spending more than you're making. And
Mm.
chances are, you could have a business and you can hire some people that can help you do what you need to do to grow it. So, effectively, yes, that's the short answer. But, I mean, you got the imposter syndrome that probably creeped in, like, I'm not ready for this. I'm 22 years old. But to your point, like, we're living in different times already at that point where, yeah, our moms and dads were married. My dad had me at 23. I mean, I was nowhere in my mind, nowhere near ready for a kid or a family or anything like that at 23. I was still very much out there, in the party world. I was in that club scene still, even with the water game. So water was Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday, I was back in Manhattan, throwing parties or running club doors, as you well know. And so that was like that became a side hustle, a really good one, but none of that is conducive of, having a family and settling down and whatever.
Right.
Um,
Well,
and
why did you do both? Like, what was that? What gave you what philosophy were you using? Like, hey, I'm doing this thing 9 to 5. You may make it a few bucks.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
why have to do the events? Why keep doing
I
both?
loved it. I enjoyed it very much. I mean, to me, taking care of my friends and making sure they didn't have to wait online and handing them free drinks and all that was just a real great thing, a good perk. I was also making cash a lot, which, wasn't, I was getting a check basically on the one hand. And again, growing up in Brooklyn, I don't have to tell you again, but for anybody listening, like, the mentality was you got to be a hustler. It's about how you're gonna, stack paper and build something and sleep wasn't even a really big deal at the time. It felt like because we were young and carefree in that respect. So priorities were different. Didn't have obviously wife, kids, or anything like that. So what was left to do but to do, things that were gonna produce. And so because I was already in that world, and because I had the kind of the freedom of time and energy and everything else, it never really occurred to me to ever stop doing that. In fact, I wanted to do more of it, if anything. And I latched onto some really great guys like Richie Romero, who's still going, to this day.
We just interviewed him. We just
You
released a
should
podcast there.
I'm sorry to
Yes.
have to follow that act. He's got a lot better, more interesting stories,
It's
to tell
great.
than I, but no, but certainly. And Richie's still a friend to this day, great entrepreneur, somebody I learned a lot from back then. And, again, being under their tutelage and seeing and back then, New York City nightlife was the premier thing in the world. It's not like that today. That whole club district, I want to say that 10 block, 15 block radius, where there was just a density of parties going on all the time. That doesn't exist now. So if it were happening today, I don't know if I would, be as attracted to the situation as much as it was then. But back then, we all knew each other, all the promoters, and all the door guys, everybody looked out for each other. It was just a whole other community. And, I appreciate that part of my life. It wasn't the most savory time per se, but you learn a lot. And I, by the way, made enough money doing that to pay for my wedding, to buy my wedding ring, to buy Justice Bennett, wedding band. Like all those things were things I stacked cash for. So, growing up in the 90s in New York City, if you weren't hustling, what were you doing? Really, what were
Well,
you see?
I think
Fuck,
there was a work ethic that was instilled by your
without a
parents,
doubt,
right? Through sports, through academics, and then you just
without a doubt,
transferred that over into work, right? You weren't
without a doubt.
afraid to go out when it rained or snowed or whatever. You was just like, you got to go, right?
Right.
The interesting part is because you bring it up. For me, what happened was I liked the creative side of
Mm.
the nightlife and the events, and
Yep.
I like to people to be happy and satisfied. And I think through events and people coming out and going to different events and finding a space that's just like bare and then kind of creating something around that brought me joy and
Yeah.
creativity and allowed me to even till now, like I think like this podcast has reactivated that creativity that I've
Interesting.
been lacking through events and through nightlife that I haven't, because I haven't been in that industry for a while.
Yeah.
And this podcast has reactivated that. And
Yeah. I can
and
see
part
that.
of me actually became kind of like a people pleaser, so like
Mhm.
I had to, like 10, 15 years ago, I was like, whoa, what am I doing? Why am I so focused on the customer? Because it's like, oh, the customer's always right. Well, you know what? Then that's going to make you very miserable because there's customers out there that no matter what you do are never going to be happy, right?
Sure.
So like I had to like reevaluate that and figure out, okay, what part of this side of the business do I enjoy and what
Mhm.
do I want to continue? So for
Yeah.
you, yeah, go ahead. You want to say something?
No, no, no. I totally can. That resonates with me too. And it's when you mentioned the creative side, it kind of sparked something in my mind too. That was, when I took the Mark Twain test. I don't know if you ever took
Oh
that
yeah.
test.
Yeah, I've
In high
taken that. Yeah.
creative writing was my one of my talents, if you will. And to this day, I always just, and part of the reason why I like marketing so much is because you can really think outside the box and get creative. And like you said, look at a raw space and say, you know, what would go great here? You know, what would bring about a great experience if we did something like this? And I have that same mentality. I have that same heart. And I think if you're a great business owner, you probably have that in there somewhere. Like at least on my side of the fence, like I've learned two things are very important to become a great entrepreneur. You need a vision and you need implementation, right? Vision is nothing without implementation. If you're implementing something without a vision, you know, where are you going? So for me, I'm the visionary in my company, and my partner Eric is a great implementer. So we make for a really great partnership, I think. And so just having that creative visionary side, like both of us do, I think create is a lot of fun. First of all, I enjoy it. I enjoy kind of making something out of nothing, if you will. And so it's cool that to see you, as I've known you for so long, kind of evolved in a way, but sticking to, you know, really what is your grassroots talent, so to speak, which is being creative, you know, and seeing something and making something out. I'm like, wow, Jimmy's doing pie. I didn't even realize you were doing this like that. But that makes sense though, like because you would take a space and you would make a party out of it. Now you're taking this space and you're making a party out of it in a sense. So, you know,
The
and I'm having a
party's your
great time,
life.
Jimmy. What's that?
The party's your life.
Exactly. But
I
that's why I'm
like
having a
to
great time, you know, talking about it. So
yeah,
you're
you
doing
know what it is? It's like for me, like over the years, like anytime I meet someone interesting, I just want to know more about their life, more about I'm just curious person, right? So
yeah,
like
that's
I can meet
curiosity.
somebody on the bus stop, start chit chat. Oh, where are you from? You know, oh, you're from this part
Yeah,
of this way. Tell me about it. What do you eat? Like I'm just interested, like I've always been,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
The reason
Curiosity is key. Very, very important.
the reason I left nightlife was because I felt like there's like a really gray area there of like what's right, what's wrong, what type
Hmm.
of deals you're making with people. And I
Sure.
felt like I was kind of veering in this gray area because it was so normal. Because there was a lot of great people in the industry, but there was some people that were just in it for quick money, that were trying to
Oh,
scam
absolutely.
everybody, that were, you know, saying hello to you and hugging you, and then next minute they're trying to stab you in the back, you know, literally a second
Sure.
later. So I was like, you know what? I just started not really liking the business. And
Mhm.
also, I couldn't sell. Like, if you started a promotional company in New York City back then and you tried to sell it, who's going to buy it? You
Mm.
know, if you
Sure.
start a digital marketing company,
I'm
you know,
sorry.
there might be a buyer. You start a water purification company, somebody might buy it. So I started
Oh, yeah.
realizing that, um, where's my future, right? And what am I gonna do to grow and become better? Just like you, right? You were 22, you got in this business with your a couple of friends. So
Yep.
tell me about Sky Water. So you have this partnership.
Yeah.
You're equity partner in this one with two friends, or you're just doing sales?
So it's great that you bring that up because again, probably being a little younger and a little naive, maybe, you know, I'm thinking these are my friends. We started this company together. It's our company. We started it day one, you know. I sold the first 500 machines. My partner, my boy Eric's installed the first 500 machines. And these two guys in the back were making sure that the money was lined up properly. Many years later, I want to say about 5, 6 years later, we had kind of a big argument about how things should go. And, you know, they were kind of starting to go veer off course. They wanted to do things, frankly, fraudulently. And I didn't think we needed to do that because we had a great, honest business. Like, why the hell do we need to do, you know, go that route? I know it would help us maybe make money faster, but, you know, forget about that. We're doing something good here. But anyway, we got into this big argument and they were like, well, this is the way we're going. And I'm like, well, I say no. And they're like, well, it doesn't really matter what you say because you're not a partner in this company. And I'm like, what do you mean I'm not a partner in this company? And so I learned a very hard lesson about getting it in writing. And you talk about guys that were backstabbing you in the club world. That could happen in any world.
They can
Okay.
happen anywhere. Yeah, yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
the club industry far and away is not a savory one. And there's definitely plenty of greed and all of that. But that's not unique to the club industry. It is anybody, you know, money itself is amoral. You put it in the hands of somebody who is moral, it'll become a moral thing. You put it in the hands of somebody who's immoral, they're going to do something that's immoral with it. And so, you know, I think when I was with these guys, we started to achieve a little success and they got a taste of, you know, being in charge, so to speak, and realizing legally they had this right. And I didn't, and it really set me back emotionally, mentally. I'm sure you can imagine having started something. I was running a whole sales team at this point. We had about 20 people or so working for us, a number of technicians that Eric oversaw. And I'm kind of looking at them like, what are you kidding me? Like, what do you mean? Like, and so I was only 26 or 7 at that point, and realized I was still very young, although very comfortable and very used to this lifestyle, but I wasn't going to stand for that. I wasn't going to just stick around and continue to just be a salesperson for a company that I felt, I founded, and I did. I
Yeah.
truly did. Um, and so it was at that point that I actually started going back to Brooklyn College at night, and I was going to night school to finish my degree. Because the job that really kind of presented itself through my fraternity network was with Empire Surgical, which was an exclusive, which means they had exclusivity to sell orthopedic supplies from Johnson and Johnson here in New York City.
Oh,
So effectively, I was going to go into the medical device space. And the CEO at the time said, I see, you got a lot of accolades in sales and a lot of people like you, whatever. He's like, but why didn't you finish a college degree? And I told him why. And he's like, well, I don't hire people that don't finish what they start. So that's when I went back to school to finish my degree. And about a year later, he was like, wow, you finished it. Great. Good for you. By the way, my grades were better than ever at that point. I think part of it was because I paid for school myself at that time. I put myself through it, so I wasn't going to squander that
yeah.
investment. But also I had my it. I had a reason to finish. I knew what I was going to school for, and that mattered a great deal to me for motivational sake, etc. So, anyway, went back to school, finished my degree, got hired by Empire Surgical in about 2013, and that was a really big year. Since we've been so personal, I have to mention from February of 13 till August of 13, I grew up. I got every degree and certificate that really are important to anybody. I in February on my birthday got engaged to Jess.
Hmm.
In April, we got married. It was only about a couple months later, still had a major wedding, and then graduated college in June. I had finished my degree at that point, got hired by Empire in that same month, and moved out of my parents' house, finally moved out of the basement, and had Nico in August. So in like a few months, I got the marriage certificate, college degree certificate, and birth certificate,
That's
all in
awesome.
6 months. Okay. Talk about growing up, right? And I was 28 years old. And that was like a real like acceleration right there. It was like out of my house on my own, paying rent, doing everything I needed to do as a man, became a father, and that really changed everything. I dropped nightlife at that point, right? Like as soon as he was born, I was done. The last place I was working at actually was I don't think it was it called Level at the time? I don't know if
Oh
I think
yeah.
it might have been
I don't
it might have
remember
been
what it
called
was.
something else in Bay
Yeah,
Ridge.
yeah,
I forgot the name of it. I think it was something else. It wasn't
yeah,
called it used to be Level, and then it was something else when I was doing it.
yeah.
I forgot. You ask Eugene Mack, he'll tell you, or Anthony Doc. Those guys remember. But I never forget finding out that we were having him and me being at the door that night and being like, I got to be careful. Like, like it's not about me
Oh
anymore. Like
yeah,
that
yeah,
feeling of knowing like I can't just
yeah,
like be out here in these streets and like some idiot wants to say I want to get into this place. I'm gonna be like, yeah, just go in because I'm not getting in your way right now. I got a
yeah.
kid coming. So anyway, so
Changes a
I
lot.
dropped nightlife, and that was tough at the time because that was a supplementary income. But, I kind of trusted God with that situation. I knew that being married and being in nightlife didn't go hand in hand. For some people, it can, I guess. For me, it couldn't. The two could not coexist, especially being a dad. Like, what am I going to get home at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning and then start changing diapers? And you can't be on point. You can't do that. So, I went from 18 to 28 nightlife, dropped that, started working for Empire. I was making more money than I was making in water, as you might imagine. Medical device sales, a bit more prominent. I looked at it as graduating to kind of the major leagues, very competitive, very technical. I was given kind of Brooklyn as a territory to run around, which was great because I still lived there. Me and my wife got an apartment in Bensonhurst. So it was like right in my backyard. I was doing a lot of stuff. And that was when I really felt like I grew up because I got a lot of corporate experience at that time now, right? I went from being like a scrappy startup guy, learning a lot that way organically, to now being in a much more structured, paperwork driven, environment, very competitive environment. All the culture at that company was all about athletics. So you got a lot of D1 or D3 former athletes. You got
Mm.
musicians and actors. These guys all take practice very seriously. And this was a really big ingredient for my professional development because realizing how important practice was, and my CEO at the time, his name was Dirk Gorman, he really took practice and learning very seriously. He himself was a AAA major baseball player, not quite major league. And so I think that there's a common thread to anybody who's an athlete or a musician or anything to that effect, where you're used to practice and you're used to competition, and that translates very well in sales. It just does, right? So if you're a student and you're curious, it was another byproduct that you mentioned, and you have all these things kind of in a dough and you're working on them daily, your craft is gonna get perfected. And you're not just gonna be somebody who has a gift of gab, recklessly speaking. You're gonna really kind of hone in on certain traits that are necessary to provide value for people, to close the gap between where they are and where they want to be. And really uncovering that is a skill. And so his vision was that he wanted to make sales, a very respected profession, whereas it can get overly, often looked at as like a greasy car salesman kind of vibe where, it's untrustworthy, etc. And he was all about integrity. And so the combination of all these things and being in a culture with like these types of guys that would go to the gym at 5 a.m. It was literally the 5 a.m. club there where these guys would all go work out together, crack of dawn. It really shaped me into now the business owner that I eventually became. And so that whole timeline, that whole like 28 to 32 or so, was a really really unique stretch for me in terms of growth, for sure.
So tell me, so you're working at this company. How long are you at this surgical company for surgical supplies?
So about 4 years, a little less actually. And things were going great for me. I was, just, crushing it. I was, top of my game pretty much. Any scoreboard that I could be on top of, I was around the top, because it mattered very much to me. Again, that competitive nature, of, winning and being at the leaderboard. Scoreboards have just always been something I care deeply about. So anyway, things are going great, and wouldn't you know it, J&J decides to buy this dealership, and go direct. They didn't want to have any sort of distributorships anymore. Their model changed. And I was offered a position, but it was all the way out in like Suffolk County. Um, and I'm like, I just bought a house in Staten Island. Like, I'm going to go from Staten Island to Suffolk County. It's hours and hours, and I got to be at this in the OR, at 7:30 in the morning, something like that. So how am I doing that? Especially with a young kid, I'll never get to see him. And so it was around that time that Eric, who was still working for Skywater, by the way, he stayed with them for about 10 years. I left after about 6. He said to me, "Hey, Ralph, we really should start our own water business." And I said, "You know what? I've been there, done that. Not going back in the water. It's probably already soaked up anyway. I mean, we've been doing it for so long. There's nothing left on the bone. Like, we're good. I'm good." But then he showed me all these stats and information about plastic, and it's like 85% of the world still drinking it, and it's billions of dollars in the industry. And he's like, but more than that, he's like, we could do it our way, the right way, do it, the right thing by people. And we can call our own shots in our life. And around, I was about 31 years old, had a little kid, trying to have another kid, trying to buy a house, and all of these things are kind of circulating at the same time. And you know what? I was like, let's do it. Let's give it a go. Let's start our own business. It was very audacious at the time. Luckily, also both of our wives had a good career themselves, so that came in very handy to ensure that we weren't going to like drown and not like be able to pay our bills.
Yeah.
And we did take a salary day one, by the way. So Hydrate, we incorporated almost 9 years ago to the day, and we started taking a salary from day one because we wanted to put that pressure on ourselves to perform. We wanted to feed ourselves, and we also wanted to
Did you
make sure that
guys
we were
did you
holding
guys
ourselves.
fund did you fund this business, or did you,
Yeah.
like,
Well,
bring in
actually,
investors?
no. So in part, yes, us, but also his brother helped get us off the ground. I had enough savings that I could have made that investment originally, but his brother, a bit older, had some things going on for himself. He was a generous guy. Was like, I want to help you guys, and he did. And thankfully, because of our past experience in the industry, the manufacturers and the powers that be, if you will, were like, we're going to help you guys get started, and you're not going to have to make as heavy of an investment as we normally ask because we know you know what you're doing, and this is going to last for a very long time. They were smart to
Yeah.
do that, and we were grateful that they did. We started the company with little to no overhead. We worked out of our home offices. We bought one van and a pallet of units with a small, storage place facility, like a 10 by 10, like a stop and store kind of thing. And we just housed them there. And the other piece that was great for us, luckily, was like I said, we did genuinely do this work back when. So we just went back to those same people that knew us. They didn't know those other two guys who were getting fat in the back office because they never showed their face. But me and Eric, they knew from sales and service. So we just went back to them. And Jimmy, when I tell you our first ever in-person meeting, we signed the contract. And it was just validation to us that we were doing that
Right.
we were right to do this. We did sincerely. Like, one thing I should tell anybody listening to this still, and thank you for still listening to my rant, but I will say, when you sincerely put in the hard work and you genuinely show up and do it the right way, nobody can ever take that from you. Nobody. I don't care if it's a friend or a partner or a would-be partner. You did it. You earned it, right? And so those skills and everything you developed are yours, and that never leaves you. And thankfully, your work wasn't in vain, right? And so because we had done the right thing all the while, it wasn't very difficult for us to start up, where I'm sure for a lot of business owners it is, and most businesses fail in the first year. And so thankfully we didn't have that problem. We were also very frugal. We always put the money back in the business. We never really pigged out when we, did make some bigger deals. We could have taken more, but we decided to stay with our very, very, humble base pay, just enough to kind of get by. Because we felt like the most important thing was to keep the ship floating. Just
Yeah.
keep it going, and in the long run, we'll make it. We'll be fine. Just don't be greedy. Don't look at this as a cash cow. Look at this as a legacy building opportunity, where we could serve others and do the right thing. And we had a great mantra at the time. We were like, people over profits. No matter what, we put people's needs above our own. It'll come back to us. It just will. And it has. 9 years later, it really has. And I could fill in so many more gaps, but I want to stop there because I could just
Well,
go on.
I wanna follow up with, like, so how'd you structure like, did you hire salespeople? Did you, like, eventually, that's probably the first year or 2, you're just out there, you guys are doing everything, right?
Yeah, pretty
Uh,
much. Yeah.
and
The,
then,
the
like, what was your goal? Like, were you like, "All right, we're gonna grow the business 20%, 50% year over
yeah.
year?" Like, or was it just like, "Let's roll with it, let's see what happens, and then we'll figure it out?"
Yeah, that's good. So to answer the first question, yeah, it was just me and him running around for the first year and a half almost. We did hire an administrator to help us with like all the paperwork and the contracts and some of the billing and things like that, because you just can't do all of those things. And
Okay.
he was luckily somebody who had worked at Skywater. One interesting note about Hydrate: every single hire we've ever had has always come through word of mouth. Not that we had to make it that way. It wasn't like a rule that we put in place or anything. It's just the way it's always worked out, like organically, like a friend of ours, or I had my aunt working for me at one point, and a friend of a friend or a cousin. It always came through like word of mouth within the company. To this day, we have 40 employees now. And nobody's been
Awesome.
hired off of Indeed or LinkedIn or Monster. And not that there's anything wrong with that. It just hasn't been the way. And so our culture has always been very impressive to me because we have like a common thread, even through the diversity of the people, there is a commonality because of that word of mouth, I think. So just a little interesting sidebar. But back to the plan, we started, as I call it, I like to say we started with the end in mind. What does that mean? This industry, we've always known that there's a clear exit. This business is sellable anytime we want. There is a couple of big players in the space that will definitely buy us up anytime. As it turns out, post COVID, we've been attracted to or attractive to many PE institutions, as you might imagine. They're looking for subscription based companies in a commoditized space. So naturally, we fall in line with that. So, um, but by Quench, which is kind of the bigger player that I think of when I talk about selling the company, they do exactly what we do. We're frenemies. They're our competitors, but they've also grown so much they bought all the manufacturers. So we buy from them and we sell against them. And they've done a good job about it. They don't pig out and say, okay, we're going to sell the same product that we're selling to you. They do sell a different line and they don't, beat up the price point where it's, we can't compete. They're very smart. They actually work very hard to sort of fatten you up so that they can eat you, which isn't a bad deal when you think about it. So they help you grow. And then when you're ready, they'll buy your whole book. So we always knew that there was an exit. We always knew there's an end in mind. My goal from day one, it wasn't to grow necessarily X% year over year. It was to sell 10,000 machines or place 10,000 machines on rental, as that's how the model works. 10,000 machines in the field at an average rate of about $100 a month, which was kind of the average rental price back then. It's up a little bit, of course, with all the inflation, but more or less it's still around that price point. And getting to 10,000 machines was just a number that we picked that we thought was achievable. It was reasonable and reachable within a 15-year time span. So now, about to start year 10, completing 9 years, I'm very proud to say that we're on track to still hit that goal. And so that's very exciting, but it wasn't without all the grit and grind of the beginning and then hiring organically and slowly the kind of, I want to say, the right people. Not everybody was the right hire, but a lot of really good people, just good people. That's really what we care about is good people. I think we're famous for moving people around within the company, not to let them go and fire them because they're not great at what they do. They're great people. They're just not great at this job. Maybe we could find another role for them. And we have
Sure.
three guys that are still with us to this day that were hired for, actually, all three of them were hired to do sales and now, do completely different things, not sales, customer success, warehouse and inventory management, like just a more systems guy. So it's always been about having great people and doing right by our people internally and externally. And I really feel like that's been such a secret sauce for us having this great culture and, a five-star business, as I call it, because if you Google us, that's our rating still. And I check every day because
Could
it
you
only
could
takes
you
one.
yeah, could
Uh,
you tell me can you give me an
yeah.
example of, like, you say you always put your customer first, you always take care of them. What's an example of that you've done?
Yeah.
What's a situation
Yeah,
that
I think that one of the best examples I could give you is that, there have been times where people haven't been on time with their bills. And we still went out and changed their filters so that they wouldn't have no water. That is us putting the cart before the horse in many respects. And if my CFO is listening right now, he's probably cringing because that's not a very winning strategy as far as like capitalism is concerned. But we've never really been let down. And in the two or three instances where the people kind of didn't still pay after we did the right thing, we parted ways with them, and then we get our unit back and we put it somewhere else where it belongs. And so we never really gotten hurt by doing the right thing either, which is really great. And in more cases than not, it's actually proven to serve us much better because people will then go online. They'll write, you know what? Let me write a review. You know what? Let me refer you to somebody. You know what? Let me introduce you to somebody who I think could be helpful to work for you or be for your business. And so these people have become value adds to our business because we have kind of gone, I don't want to say above and beyond, but in effect, yeah, because, a lot of companies will be like, you know what, we're not going to serve you right now until you pay your bills. And now that we've gotten into coffee and gotten, into the whole break room with snacks and disposables, we've had to tighten the belt in this respect, because first of all, water is life-giving. If people don't have water, they're high and dry, not that they can't figure it out, but like, I don't like to leave people like that in the lurch, so we'll just go out there and we'll change their filters for them, or do any kind of repair that needs to go on. But like coffee and snacks and all these things, they're kind of like luxury items in a way. And if you're really behind, like, 100 days on your bills, it really wouldn't be sensible to release that inventory to you right now. You know what I mean? Like,
Right, right,
let's get on
right.
the phone, let's work it out. What's going on? How can we help? It's interesting being in commercial services, and I've talked to a few guys who do various commercial service business. It's a tough world. Okay, what other world do you not pay at checkout? Will Amazon send you your box if you don't pay? You know what I mean? Will you go to shopping right stop and store or shop right or whatever and walk out of there with all your groceries and not,
Well,
you're gonna pay.
what's interesting is the model for businesses were always like 30, 60, 90 days.
Right, right.
That was also created because of transactions. You give a check, things
Yeah,
take long to clear. Now, either if you're ordering, pantry items for your
right,
office, basically,
right.
either you have the money, you don't need to
Yeah,
cash the client's check.
right,
But that whole thing of like 30, 60 days, that was like manufacturing, like I need to build
right.
it. It's a little different. So let me
It
ask you
is.
this.
And
Yeah,
yeah.
go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say because like what we do is like a micro purchase. It's not a lot of money, maybe a couple of $100 or something like that to a business, which is a drop in the bucket. To make me wait 90 or 100 or 120 days in some cases long, like it's months. We're talking about months and months to pay,
Right.
a small bill. And then they're like looking at you like, why don't you still send us our coffee? It's like, would you? And so doing the right thing by people is still the goal because I'm gonna be the one to jump on the phone with them and say, listen, if you're going through some hard times, maybe we can help you out. Maybe there's a way we could work through it, and we get creative. And usually, it doesn't come to that. Usually, they're like, you know what, there was just an issue with billing. We'll send out a check or we'll pay it
That's
online.
true. Yeah. So let
So
me ask you this. So you've been running this business, you're married, you have kids, you're still playing sports. You get up every day, you put your best foot forward, right? You try to do the best you can, right? Because that's what I'm gaining here from the conversation.
sorry.
Um, and all the things that happen, luck or your path, do you think it was predetermined of where you were going to end up and with who? Or do you think it was God? Or do you think it was uh, just luck? Like, how do you ever
Uh,
reflect on your life to see
oh, I
why you're in the spot that you're in now or where you are?
Yeah, I mean, that's great. It's a deep question. I reflect on life all the time, and I definitely don't believe in is that it's luck. I think if anything, hard work makes luck. If you want to say that you're lucky, I think you work hard and you get put in good positions. But I also believe in free will, so that makes it hard to say that God like pushed me into these positions per se. That being said, I am a faith-based person, and from my vantage point, I believe that if you seek the Lord with all your heart and you don't lean on your own understanding and you just acknowledge God in everything that you do, He will direct your path and lead you towards a path that is for your best interest, really for the purpose that He has for you, which is your best interest in my estimation. And so having when I became like right before I became a dad, I started to put away kind of the things of being a child myself. I started to seek the Lord again. I grew up with the Lord. My family took me to church as a kid, and I kind of walked away as a teenager because of various reasons. It was just my own selfishness or what have you, and then just wanting to see what was out there, I guess. But ultimately, I couldn't run too far from his presence. It was something that, and it continues to be something God just continues to draw me close to his side. And I keep, and the more I seek, the more I find. And so to answer your question, from my view, he gives us the freedom to do whatever we want. You can choose whatever path you want every single day, and you hear the voice in your head saying yes to this or no to that, and you can choose to listen or not. And for me, I haven't always chosen the right path, but God always makes a way to bring you back to what He has for you. The more you seek Him, and the more you kind of surrender what your fleshly desires typically are. And that has really made all the difference in my life. I'm sorry we've kind of come to the end, and that is, the first time I'm really getting into this, because in my heart of hearts, like that is the foundation of how I make decisions. It's the foundation of how I just run my life day to day, how I'm raising my children. I even weave it into my company, in how we approach people and do the right thing by people. A lot of that is biblical. So, and just servant leadership in general, the way I treat my own employees, I look to serve them. If I'm serving them and I'm making their lives better and easier, um, it works really well, actually, almost selfishly, because then they're giving me more of themselves. So the system works, and I think God's design works. It's perfect. And so to that end, all of the things that have happened, including going to Brooklyn College or whatever, it may not have been like quote unquote fate. Um, but I think that God always makes a way in any situation, and it's up to us if we want to follow that way or not. So
I
that's kind
agree.
of what.
I agree. And do you, to wrap up, is there anything that you want to leave like young or new entrepreneurs? Like if you can go back to your 20-year-old self, right? In college, what would you tell yourself, or what would you tell another entrepreneur?
I have a few pieces of advice, but I'll keep it concise. From a business perspective, well, first of all, seek what you love. Do really what listen to your heart on that one. Don't chase the dollar. Never. Always chase your passions, and then the dollar will chase you. I tell that to a lot of young students and people that are aspiring to become their own business person. I was originally an accounting major in college, and I can't imagine my life as an accountant. That requires like hardly any personality. No offense, accountants in the room. You don't necessarily need one. You kind of just need to make sure you're good with the numbers and the generally accepted accounting principles. That wasn't for me. I was doing it because I believe CPAs make a lot of money, and that was
Mm,
just a mistake. So I would always say, and what led me and started me on my path to where I am today was being brutally honest with myself and really saying, this is what I love to do, and watch organically where it leads you. See where it takes you, and you might find that because you're passionate and you're being honest with yourself, that it's going to open the right doors. Personally speaking, as I just said, I believe in spiritual foundation. I think that is critical. I think you talk to a lot of business owners or entrepreneurs, they tend to have that kind of spirit. I've learned a lot of the time. And the last thing I'll say is that there are 5 buckets that I check every single day, and it helps me sleep really well at night. 5 buckets that I contribute towards every single day that I recommend anybody out there, whether you're 20 and looking to get started, or you're 40, or even if you're later in life and you're still trying to like sort things through. To balance my life every day, I put something in the physical, mental, spiritual, financial, and emotional bucket. And that can mean a lot of things, and it doesn't necessarily have to be all, an hour, 2 hours of your time. It could be 5, 10 minutes. You could work out for 15, 20 minutes and check that physical box. You can read, a page or two in a textbook or a book that's going to help further your journey and learn and check that mental box. You could pray for 10, 15 minutes or meditate and check the spiritual box and so on. So I just think that it's so critical, and I feel so fulfilled at 40, to say that I'm kind of covering all aspects. That I don't worry about getting old. I don't worry about today or tomorrow. I just kind of just take it in stride, and it's really been very helpful to my stress levels, to my ability to continue to run a good race without burning out. And of course, having great support. My parents, like I said, are still around. I have an amazing wife who's a gifted in her own rights, business wise and otherwise, in other ways. And then of course my three children, which totally decompress my day. I can, as a dad of two yourself, that although it can be hectic and there's a lot of things that you could focus on that are chaotic, also the innocence and the amazing nuances that they bring to your life are just priceless to me. And I can't wait to see them every single day. I try to get home every single day and make sure I touch base at least. Going away on conferences and vacations even have become a little bit difficult because then I don't get to. So that's something I actually have been trying to work on, a little separation anxiety sometimes, believe it or not. So, but yeah, that's kind of what I would share.
I this is awesome. Thank you, man. And I for me, I'm the same, like in the sense of my work. Like, I try not to travel. I try to be home. I try to
Yeah.
hustle and get home by dinner so I can at least have dinner with them,
Yeah.
because
Good point.
I was reading the stat that back in the 80s and 70s, people dinner was an hour and a half long.
Wow. Wow.
And now dinners are 18 to 20 minutes, if that, because of the phones, because of this, because of, so my wife sometimes like, oh my God, I've been in the kitchen, for all this time. And I'm like, but they're hanging out with us. Like, don't think of
Yeah.
it like this is torture. It is, because they're constantly shouting out
Some of
the
it.
pans, and
Yeah. The kids.
they're a unpleasant customer that never is going to give you a good review. You know what I mean?
That's
Once in a
very
while,
good.
you get "I love you" and "You're the
Yeah.
best,"
Yeah.
but for the
Sometimes you
most
got a
part,
fortune out of them too, which is
yeah,
fine.
for
I don't have a problem with that.
sometimes they're just gonna yell at you and be unhappy all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So, like, there's obviously that. So anyway, it's interesting. Look, your life story has been great. I know you a long time, and I'm very happy that you've had success and that you're doing great.
Thank
I
you.
think that your story says a lot about a lot of different things, ups and downs, right? There could have been a couple situations there where you pulled back and said, "I'm out," and called
Yeah.
it quits. But no, you kept going, you kept pushing, you kept striving for more, and I commend you for that.
Thank you, my friend, and same to you, and thanks for having me on. And yeah, I mean, you got to keep putting one foot in front of the other. Everybody out there, just keep showing up. That's 80% of life a lot of the time. And by the way, with the kids, we have on our dining room table, there are no devices allowed at that table, including my own, including my wife. So we do that meal is elongated because of that. You make a good point with the devices. Get rid of them as much as you can. Sometimes you need them, I get it, but, like, at the dinner table, if you could help it, we put those things away, and nobody's allowed to touch them until dinner's over. So, another little helpful tidbit, hopefully, to all
Love
you,
it.
young moms and dads out there. Try to make that possible and get that quality time in. They're only young once, and it goes fast. It really does, but I've tried not to let it go fast by being present, and then it's like I've gotten as much as I can. My oldest guy is 12. He's gonna be 13 this year. It's just mind-boggling. And talk about an unhappy customer. When those hormones start kicking in, buddy, yeah, sometimes I'm like, "Wait, what happened to my little boy?" He's just like,
Yeah.
"Dad, leave me alone." Like,
Yeah.
"Okay."
Oh,
That's where we're
yeah.
at now.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah,
Well,
man,
you
I
know what they
appreciate
say?
you having me on.
They say 12, 13 to like 21, they want nothing to do with you, but then around
Yeah,
21, they start coming back because they start
yeah.
realizing how the world really is. But anyway,
That's been my
Ralph,
experience.
thank you for being on the show. Really appreciate it. Thank you. It's been awesome, man.
Thank you very much. Good to be on. Good to see you.